Growing up in a small town really changes your perspective. It lets you enjoy the little things in life, and it provides a sense of community. And to live in a place like Farmville, Virginia, that has so much history, from High Bridge to being one of the first 2 college towns in the United States, to being a cornerstone for the kayak fishing industry, home to Appomattox River Company that's been in business for 40 years. It's really unique, and aside from Farmville's history, I think my favorite part about our town is our history.
So early September of 1993, I sat down with a man named Ed Schennebeck at a company called Carbohydrate of America and interviewed for what at the time was the first manufacturing job that I had ever interviewed for. Spent probably a good hour or two with Ed. He's a great guy, really, really good manager. I could tell right away in the interview that there was a fire in him. He loved manufacturing. I had done a lot of construction, but I had never been in a manufacturing environment. And even that first interview, that first impression, it left a good impression on me, and it seemed like the kind of place I might want to work. So we got to the end of the interview, and Ed said, he's like, "Look, you interviewed well. I can't hire you." And I was like, "Why? If I interviewed well and if I scored well." And he said, "Well, you have to have either a high school diploma or a GED." So I was like, "Oh, okay. Can I get one of those?" And he's like, "Yeah." So the HR department helped me figure out how to do that, and went and did that over the next couple of weeks. And towards the end of September in 1993, I started my first manufacturing job, which was basically putting pans into a really long, like 60-foot oven with a belt that moved like 2 inches a minute. It was probably the most boring job I've ever had in my entire life. But developed a passion for manufacturing that, quite frankly, has been there ever since.
So Tay and I, we grew up with YakAttack, definitely, and that was something that we grew up with it. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. YakAttack started in 2009, and when it started, how old were you? Like
10? Yeah, I was a newly acquired 10.
When did the Busy Carbon?
The Busy Carbon Pro started in like 2010. Because I remember that we had just started making the Busy Carbon Pro, or we were just about to get ready to start the Busy Carbon Pro when it moved from Bob's house to our garage. Because I knew how to make the Busy poles, but we never really manufactured a whole lot of them at our house.
So, Mom, what was it like to move into the garage and then grow out of the garage? Like, what did that look like?
Well, when it first came into the garage, we had a lot of space at first, because it was only like 1 or 2 products that we were building, and then it was nice to have it in there because you guys were still homeschooled at that time, and so I would go out there and package the few orders that we would have for the day, or meet the UPS guy, or do whatever it was that I had to do, and then you guys would be in the house doing your schoolwork, and you'd come out and ask a question or whatever, and I'd be like, go back in there and do your schoolwork, and then after school, after everything was packaged, we would take a trip every day to go to the post office and ship stuff out.
Oh my gosh, we were like buddies with the post office.
Yeah, everybody knew us.
We had a community.
So around probably 2011, we were about 2 years in at YakAttack. We had been in my buddy's basement and then in our garage, and it was getting to the point that it was getting a little bit cramped. I had even rented like a tiny bit of like 100 square feet or something like that from a guy up the road just to store some stuff so we'd have enough room to work. But it was becoming evident that if we wanted to grow anymore, we'd need some space. So we started looking around, and Farmville was a logical option for us. It's close enough to drive to. Small town, but big enough town that there are some buildings around. So I talked to the county administrator and the local chamber of commerce to try to figure out what was available, because they generally know that kind of stuff. And I was looking at a building that they had recommended right off of Main Street in Farmville, and I turned around and I saw another little building, much smaller, but still bigger than anything we needed, and it had a for rent sign on it and had a phone number. So I walked over to it and got the phone number off of it and called. The person on the other end said, yeah, that building's available and we can meet you over there. Turned out they were literally next door. So we met over there. I met with a man named Preston Lancaster, super great guy. And he was the owner of the building. So we walked around, toured it. It was about 3,000 square feet, which was a little bit too big for what we needed. We were moving from 400 square feet, so to put it in perspective, that was huge. And I was really concerned about being able to afford it. So I said, well, can we rent half of it, and then if we grow into it, then rent the other half? And Mr. Lancaster just kind of laughed, and he was like, well, why, let's just work out something on the whole thing. So he gave us a great deal to be able to rent that whole building. And he even said then, he said, I have a feeling you're gonna be growing out of this soon. And he was right. It took about probably a year and a half, and then that one was busting at the seams. So looked around again in Farmville, but couldn't really find anything that was the right size. There was a couple of buildings that were much, much larger, and there were a couple that were just not big enough to warrant a move. So ended up in Burkeville. Found a building out there that we've been in since, I guess, 2012. So yeah, I have one funny story from last time we were in Farmville. So I had this, actually I still have it, this old blue Dodge Dakota pickup truck. And it's a manual, and as some people, basically everybody who works with me knows, I'm not always the best multitasker, and I can be a little bit forgetful. So anyway, I pulled up, probably on a mission. I don't remember what I was doing. I remember it was a weekend. My son was in there working. His car was parked in the parking lot. And the way this thing's situated, the parking lot's like a hill, and then there's like a retaining wall with a fence, and you actually drive down the little entrance to get out. And then there's like a, 10-foot drop down to the street, and then right across the road from that's a restaurant. So anyway, I pulled in, and his car was parked over here. I pulled in kind of nose to nose, and went in and worked or whatever. And then Tyler went to leave for the day, and he told me later that he got outside and he saw that I had pulled my truck up to where the bumpers were touching. And he didn't think anything of it, because he was like, that's exactly something like you would do, kind of trying to be funny. So he backs out and does the loop around the parking lot to go out the little entrance. And as he's turning, making that loop, he sees my truck careening towards the fence with nobody in it. So it apparently I had left it out of gear and left the parking brake off. I have no idea how, but apparently. And it went towards that retaining wall, struck another vehicle, and took out the fence, and then went, to go off of the retaining wall. Fortunately, there was a telephone post that's like a foot away from the retaining wall on the sidewalk side. So the truck ended up kind of T-boning the telephone pole and just sitting there. So he came in and he was like, your truck just wrecked. And I'm like, how did my truck wreck? And he told me what happened. I went outside and I was like, man, you gotta be kidding me. So it's funny, even to this day, you see that fence, there's like this long black fence, and it's a little faded and weathered. And then there's this really new section that I paid for. Ended up in Burkeville, and eventually accumulated some more space there in Burkeville until finally there just wasn't enough space for what we needed. So here we are back in Farmville. It's really cool. My manufacturing career started, not quite a stone's throw, but a BB gun shot from here. I mean, we're at 100 Industrial Park Road. 300 Industrial Park Road is the address of Carbone, where I worked for over 10 years. I can remember leaving Carbone many times, sitting at the stoplight, because back when I first went to work there, it's like 300 people, 400 people working there. So it would take a few cycles of the light if you left at the end of the shift. And sitting there looking, and over to the left, there was this building. At the time, we called it the shoe factory. That's what they used to make here. And later on, it became the Steps building. And now it's YakAttack.
So for me, I've been with YakAttack pushing 5 years in January, and when moving here, one of the things I wanted to factor in was the fishing. It's always been a part of my life, and I didn't want to be a place where I couldn't fish or always had to dedicate so much road time to get to the fish. So we got actually really lucky with having some great fisheries around. And it was actually, I don't know if it was the second or third in-person interview for me with Luther of whether he wanted to hire me. The one thing we actually, I think, spent the most time on, it was, rather than the facilities, the offices and where I would be working, or, housing opportunities of finding, places to live, or, nearby Richmond, it was, I think he spent the most time dedicating to show me the fisheries. We went to Briary Creek and, showed me the access points, and, and then we drove, I think, over here to Sandy River Reservoir. And it was just, I think that he coined me and pegged me right, that it was basically, you do care more about fishing than maybe even a social life. And I think it was the one that, I wanted the opportunity to work for YakAttack and to work for Luther, but also was a big part of my life, and is a big part of my life, to spend time on the water and, kayaking and bass fishing. So we do luck out and have some pretty good fisheries where, Briary Creek, it's just about 6 or 7 miles outside Farmville. For me, it's only, 7 or 8 miles from my house, but it's also really close and to our new facility. So it's one that, after work on a Friday or after work middle of the week, we can get our staff out and take them to Briary, and that's something that, being so close to Briary Creek, is going to be a little bit my focus in the next years, to get more of our staff out there enjoying our products and getting on the water and having fun and seeing what YakAttack is about, more than just business and more than just making and selling our products. Briary Creek is a wildlife management area created, I think, about 25 years ago, and it kind of progressed into a big bass factory here in Virginia. It's one that, even someone, close friend of mine and a close friend of the brand, Chad Hoover, he would always drive over, I think when stationed in, Virginia Beach area for the Navy, would drive over here instead of fishing the Chesapeake to catch those big bass that were basically, untouched and, in Briary Creek. And, both Briary and Sandy have, motor restrictions on the amount of horsepower. And, even looking today, it's a beautiful day. Friday, 5 o'clock, and there's not a whole lot of people out here. So from a pressure standpoint, it's really a beautiful fishery. Not a lot of houses, really kind of secluded. And Briary as a whole is nothing but flooded timber. Pretty much, for me, coming from Tennessee River, of, pitching docks and structure and ledges and humps, and, it's very different to me to come to an area that, was really unlike anything I've ever seen, of having, so much timber and so much trees. Kind of every corner you look is fishy. So it's taken a little while to dial in and figure it out, but it's become a fun fishery that, if you're okay with losing, some lures, every time you go out, you're gonna have a good time.
So when people ask me, what's your 5-year plan, I always smile a little bit, because the original 5-year plan was to be relevant in 360-degree lights for kayaks. And I think by year 2, we were the standard. So I tend to project really conservatively, so I always tend to underestimate a little bit where things are going. 10 years into this now, actually on our 11th year, I think I've started to kind of see the trajectory. And I mean, I think 5 years from now, YakAttack has got this building packed to the gills, full of machines, full of people. I think at that point we have continued our position as a leader in the kayak fishing industry, but also we're also in other industries by that point, you know, organizing other small spaces and attaching other things to other, you know, other types of watercraft and vehicles and whatever else people need, you know, things held within reach. So, you know, I think for us, this is the move here to Farmville, the move to our first true manufacturing facility. It's really more of a beginning than a summit. You know, where it goes from here, it's a really, really long climb, and it's a really, really high mountain that we intend to climb. This is just putting us in a position to finally be able to organize ourselves in a way that we can achieve it.